Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a US election daily update, the Harris-Trump Showdown, where I'm going to talk you through what has happened today. Obviously, all the usual caveats apply. I am going to be somewhat biased towards Harris. I am pro-Democrat, left of centre myself. I'm not a big fan of Trump, so you all know that anyway. But what I'm trying to do is look at this as objectively as possible. Yeah, okay, whatever. But actually try and look at it strategically. So yes, okay, Trump might say something ridiculous here, and Harris might say something that was, people whooping and hollering. But actually, strategically, where does the rhetoric of each person sit? How does this affect the people in the middle? Always think about the people in the middle. So you have, particularly with Trump, I think you have a ceiling of voters that he is struggling to get beyond. He can't break that ceiling because he's doubling down on some of these divisive topics and divisive rhetoric that doesn't allow for him to try and persuade those independents, the women, the black vote, the Latino vote, the young vote, female vote, as mentioned. So he needs to get them in order to win. Now, Kamala Harris seems to be doing a better job of going around and whipping up support from these different demographics. That, I think, puts her in a better place to get across the line. So what's happened today? Well, it has essentially been the fallout of that NABJ, so the National Association of Black Journalists, where Trump went to their convention, and it was controversial before it happened. So there were a lot of people who were not happy that he was going to speak there, but actually it was absolutely right that he did, both from his own point of view. So this should have been an opportunity for him to appeal to the black vote and to really come across as well as he possibly can, to answer difficult questions but win people over with really good answers and good on-point rhetoric. And he absolutely dropped the ball. It was a complete mare. He had a right mare. And the convention was given a lot of hassle for platforming Trump, but actually it is their job, I think, to do something like this. You've got a potential president, a nominee that needs to be held to account. What are their views? Ask them, where they are going to sit on X, Y, and Z. And they did that, and they did that really well. Now, this has gone down very controversially among many. I'm not entirely sure how it's been portrayed, say, in Fox News and Newsmax, how they have tried to spin that. Because I think from any objective viewpoint, it was a disaster. Trump really has shot himself in the foot with that one. And the sort of viral meme that you see, this is a Mother Jones. I don't know if this is an actual headline for Mother Jones, but it wouldn't surprise me. White man tells black journalists his black opponent is not black. So he tried to, one of the disaster moments was him trying to explain to the audience and to the interviewers that Kamala Harris has moved from being proud of a kind of Indian heritage or Asian heritage to choosing to be more black recently. And that's just, he's saying that's not on. Like, she never used to be black and now she is black type thing. It's really weird, especially if you look at the actual facts. So she went to a predominantly black university. I think growing up, she was super proud of her African-American heritage, and went to a university that reflected that, became a member of a sorority that reflected that. Like, there was not this idea that she was like totally advocating for her other heritage. Actually, she seemed to be super ensconced in this cultural world of that's concerned with her black heritage. And so it was just, I think, first and foremost, I think it was just wrong with what he was saying, other than the fact that it seemed really bizarre. It's such a bizarre thing to try and say, especially just to the audience. Think who you're speaking to. I mean, goodness me. So this has been capitalized upon by many on the left, with many Harris supporters and in the center even. Breaking, says Harry Sisson, the Kamala Harris campaign just released this statement on Donald Trump's disastrous interview at the NABJ conference. This is how it's done. Share this everywhere, he says. Statement on Donald Trump showing exactly who he is at NABJ. This is the kind of rhetoric that some people are saying the Harris campaign is doing really well. Where Biden was playing it somewhat safe, like in taking Trump to task previously, Biden was being quite Biden-esque and not really going for the jugular. I think the Harris campaign is presently going for the jugular in a much more successful way. I think they're doing a really good job on their messaging, on their positioning. So, quote, the hostility Donald Trump showed on stage today is the same hostility he has shown throughout his life, throughout his term in office, and throughout his campaign for president as he seeks to regain power and inflict his harmful Project 2025 agenda on the American people. They're still going hard on the Project 2025 thing. And rightly so. Trump lobbed personal attacks and insults at black journalists in the same way he did throughout his presidency, while he failed black families and left the entire country digging out of the ditch he left us in. Donald Trump has already proven he cannot unite America, so he attempts to divide us. Today's tirade is simply a taste of the chaos and division that has been a hallmark of Trump's MAGA rallies. His entire campaign is also exactly what the American people will see from across the debate stage, as Vice President Harris offers a vision of opportunity and freedom for all Americans. All Donald Trump needs to do is stop playing games and actually show up to the debate on September the 10th. There's a lot of talk about whether he is going to turn up to that debate on September the 10th, but certainly a lot of bandwidth has been expended today on discussing that NABJ conference disaster. We have Bill O'Reilly on News Nation here. So Bill O'Reilly, former Fox News anchor, who is obviously super conservative, as Republicans Against Trump says, when you lose Bill O'Reilly, ... So this is what Bill O'Reilly had to say.
Donald Trump blew it, and the happiest person in the country tonight is Kamala Harris. Because she's sitting there cackling. Look at this. Yeah, look at this. Look at Trump. He's just alienated millions of black voters who aren't going to really get what happened there. The broadside against Kamala Harris was that she's a phony, that she used one bit of ethnicity to do this, one bit to do that. But Trump didn't articulate it.
And he might have been going down the route of like, well, okay, he had something to say, but he just didn't say it very well. But the central point there is that he blew it. That was an absolute disaster. But he, again, when I say he's got to be winning over these demographics, he's got to be persuading people to come to him. It's the problem is the divisive rhetoric. So he's saying that the Senate Majority Leader, who is Jewish, so Chuck Schumer, is a member of Hamas. The Republican nominee for president, folks. Republicans, you should be so proud, says Ron Filipskowski. So, as Asen said, Trump says Chuck Schumer has become a Palestinian. Yes, can you believe it? He has become a proud member of Hamas.
In line, Chuck Schumer refused to shake the Israeli Prime Minister's hand. Chuck Schumer has become a Palestinian. Yes, can you believe it? He's become a proud member of Hamas. Nancy Pelosi likewise denounced the speech in shameful terms. You know, in line.
Someone was pointing out to me that yesterday that actually, if you listen to a lot of Trump's campaigns at the moment, there really isn't the shouting and glee and joy and just all-out rapturous applause that you would hope for if you were a Trump supporter that you see at Kamala Harris's campaign rallies. Now, yes, there is this momentum, this tidal wave that she's surfing in on, but actually, you know, I think there is something in that. Like the number of times I've heard him say stuff that is just, you're looking around at the people behind you, thinking they're not. It doesn't help that he has long, rambling, like 90-minute speeches that go off on weird tangents. But yeah. Anyway, people have been pointing out that, and this has been a bipartisan thing as well, that the NABJ comments and the way that the Republicans are going about messaging at the moment is just not helpful. So Trump's NABJ comments on Harris's racial identity trigger bipartisan criticism. So Trump's questioning of Kamala Harris's racial identity during the NABJ. If you don't know about that, go and watch his his performance there, or watch my video from yesterday that gives you 4 excerpts from that, which were, I think, absolutely shocking, to give you an idea. So Republican Governor Larry Hogan said it's unacceptable and abhorrent to attack Vice President Harris or anyone's racial identity. The American people deserve better. Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski, not the biggest fan of MAGA, but Republican nonetheless, said maybe they don't know how to handle the campaign, and so you default to issues that just should simply not be an issue. South Dakota's John Thune, the Senate Republican whip, echoed similar sentiments, saying the campaign needs to be about the issues. I just think that's where the focus needs to be. Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, who's now with the Bulwark, and actually, is it MSNBC that he's on as well, but as a Republican on there, but he's not that way inclined these days so much, described the interview as a hot mess. And obviously lots of Democrats have given Trump a hard time. Now, it's interesting that Senator Mark Kelly, the Arizona senator, who is up for vice president pick, although it looks like it's going to go to Josh Shapiro, that's where all the rumors are, and it does appear that way. And the first, I think it's going to be announced in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, it would be a real kick in the teeth to announce someone else in Philadelphia and have Josh Shapiro there next to you, like campaigning. And it's not Josh Shapiro, it's Mark Kelly. And so I think it probably is pointing towards Josh Shapiro, but not necessarily. In history, actually, you've never had the announcement of the VP at the place where the VP's from. So there are, arguments either way. Anyway, in his interview with CNN following Donald Trump's appearance on the NABJ at the NABJ conference, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly hit back at the ex-president over his comments on Harris's racial identity. Quote, "It's very obvious to me watching him and just what I've seen over the last week while she's been across the country just kicking his butt that he's afraid. He's probably afraid to debate her. He is certainly afraid to lose an election to her in November, and he's afraid about his own future. She's got great momentum. She's a fantastic historic candidate. Who is he? He's just a convicted felon." Ouch, that hurts. And you're hearing a lot of these contrasts in campaign and in adverts, who she is, who he is, who she is, who he is. I talked to you previously about the most successful adverts that have the most purchase aren't just negative attack ads. If you're going to do that negative attack, you want the contrast. So you want to say, here's the good stuff, here's who we are, here's what we are going to promise, this is them. So when you're going to attack, you need to balance it with the positives, and they seem to be doing a better job of that, the Democrats at the moment. And then you've got here New Hampshire Republican governor calling on fellow Republicans to stop the trash talk. So this is Chris Sununu, who is a bit controversial. He's flip-flopped around. He was critical of Trump and then sort of kowtowed to him earlier, but now seems to have come out and said, look, stop the trash talk. The path to victory in November is not one through character attacks or personal insults. In fact, these attacks are unlikely to bring a single new voter on board. This is absolutely on point, though. Catchy one-liners calling Vice President Harris a bum, not a serious person, and bottom of the barrel might rile up the base, but they do little to connect the independent voters who needed to close the deal in November. Absolutely correct this. Everything should be seen through the lens of the independents and these people, these swing voters in the middle, and these demographics that you need to persuade to bring on side. He went on to add that attacks like those waged against Kamala Harris are unserious and don't meet the moment that American families find themselves in. You have to connect with voters on their issues and their concerns. Absolutely agree with that. Now, just to move aside from the NABJ crisis, I think it's worth reminding ourselves about Project 2025 and how Heritage Foundation leader Kevin Roberts has previously said that, you can listen to what he said. This is in the context of Trump and his campaign distancing themselves from Project 2025, effectively dropping it. This has caused a massive division within the campaign, as many on the right really like Project 2025, but as I explained yesterday, the issue that the Republicans have is that Project 2025 is deeply, deeply unpopular. Like 1 in 10 people are up for it. So if you're trying to project a not just a policy, this isn't a policy, this is an entire framework for your administration. This is how you are going to run government. And if only 10% of the people are up for that, then you're onto a loser. So actually the people that are trying to drop this are doing the right thing, right? But then, because a lot of people on this fringe right really, really like this is like their baby, their puppy, they are not happy with this. And so you've obviously got this division, but it is a division that is of their own making from being pretty, I guess they were just overconfident that they were going to win this campaign with Trump against Biden. And so they started putting in place, but I mean, Project 2025 is long in the tooth, right? It's been a long time coming. It's not just something they cooked up. It's a 900-page document that's taken some years to put together by most, a lot of people that have a lot to do with Donald Trump. So the idea that he knew nothing about it and that some parts are abysmal, but he wishes him luck is kind of obviously nonsense. And it's nonsense because this is what Kevin Roberts has said.
We've been working with all of them on one project since soon after Joe Biden took the oath of office, before any conservative presidential candidates had even entered the race. As my friend and colleague Paul Dans before talked about briefly, our Project 2025 is... Just
to give you some context there, Paul Dans has now stepped down. Like, it's so controversial, but this is them a couple of months ago at the, you can see behind, Association of Christian Communicators. This is when they said they were going to have a bloodless, I think it was at this conference, when they said they were going to have a bloodless revolution if the left let them.
Project 2025 has developed a comprehensive policy agenda, but even more importantly, recruiting people, 20,000 people to go into the next administration, hopefully to help take back this country for you and for your audiences. We want no credit. We want the American people, if President Trump is elected again, President Trump and his administration, to take credit for that. But it will also be a great sign, if all of this is successful, that in fact, as we know in our prayer time, but maybe not every time when we're watching the news, that the Lord is still smiling upon America.
So this is the idea that Trump should take the credit for Project 2025, when Trump has subsequently, a couple of months later, come out and said, I don't know anything about it and we're ditching it. But he's said a bunch of things that have been contradictory to pretty much indicate that he knew about it. So just, yeah, it's definitely problematic, the different things that people are saying concerning Project 2025. But I understand why they're trying desperately to say some of the things they are, like distancing themselves, because it's just such a bad blueprint for, not just for governing, it's a bad blueprint for attracting people over to your sort of worldview. Unearthed footage of Trump to his Project 2025 leaders.
Already we have shown the power of our winning formula, working closely with many of the great people at Heritage over the 4 incredible years that we've worked with you a lot. And we were just discussing it with Kevin Plain. They're going to work on some other things that are going to be very exciting, I think, Kevin. I think maybe the most exciting of all.
So this is the precursor to Project 2025, and when people are saying he knew, well, when he says he knew nothing about it, he's talking about, well, we're gonna work on some really exciting things with Heritage Foundation. What is that if it's not Project 2025? So, Trump is a liar is my conclusion there. Yeah, there you go. Right, then we come on to something a bit more topical today, as in, like, not just about the campaign, but actual news that's happened. For those who don't follow my Ukraine videos, there's been this prisoner swap. A load of Russian prisoners from Russia have been swapped for people from the US, Germany, Slovenia, and a whole bunch of places. Norway, I think, something to do with this as well. And why I'm playing you this is because there's a stark contrast between, I think, the Biden administration and the globalism, and I don't mean globalism as a pejorative, I just mean an outward-looking US, compared to the isolationist view of America First policy that is the hallmark of Trump and his next administration if he gets to president. And I just thought this spoke volumes.
If they so choose. This deal would not have been made possible without our allies. Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Norway, and Turkey, they all stepped up and they stood with us. They stood with us. And they made bold and brave decisions, released prisoners being held in their countries who were justifiably being held, and provided logistical support to get the Americans home. So for anyone who questions whether allies matter, They do. They matter. And today is a powerful example of why it's vital to have friends in this world. Friends you can trust, work with, and depend upon, especially on matters of great consequence and sensitivity like this. Our alliances make our people safer, and we began to see that again today. Let me say this.
So he's talking about alliances. This is, someone's written this speech, right? It won't be Biden, but someone's written a speech to say, look, America is serious about alliances. You guys are doing a great job to help us to get our prisoners back. This is the America we are. We are an outward-looking America that wants to work with others to make the world a safer place. So if you're talking about Ukraine, if you're talking about Taiwan, this is the America that the Democrats and Biden and Harris would want you to see, and that is pitted against. The idea here is that the implication is that that's not the America that Trump would have you be a part of. He would take America back from that point of looking out to the world and working with others.
It says a lot about the United States that we work relentlessly to free Americans who are unjustly held around the world. It also says a lot about us that this deal includes the release of Russian political prisoners. They stood up for democracy and human rights. Their own leaders threw them in prison. The United States helped secure their release as well. That's who we are in the United States. We stand for freedom, for liberty, for justice, not only for our own people, but for others as well. And that's why all Americans can take pride in what we've achieved today. I want to thank everyone in my...
So I think that was an interesting segment from his speech there. But it also has to be said that he did have a drop mic moment right at the end here. So check this out, the very last thing he says.
Cooperation.
Nothing.
President Biden,
What a chance this whole thing.
President Trump has said repeatedly that he could have gotten the hostages out without giving anything in exchange. What do you say to that? What do you say to President Trump now, former president?
Why didn't he do it when he was president?
Sir, what a chance this
I think that was what they call a mic drop moment at the end there. Why didn't you do it when he was president?
So this is absolutely right. So Trump had the chance to get, not all of them, some of them weren't prisoners at the time, like Evan Gershkovich, but Paul Whelan. Trump had already said, I will get them out. I will get them out even before January, before I'm inaugurated. But after I'm voted in November, they will be out and we won't be paying anything. And I'm the only one that can do this. No one else will be able to do this with Putin. And then he said that, and then they've arranged this. So that's fallen foul of reality, what Trump has said. But the idea that he could do that, he knows how to do it now, but he couldn't do it for the 4 years. He was. I mean, why was Paul Whelan not released then? So there are some interesting. I mean, I just think that was a great moment for Biden and a great thing to end on as well. Drop mic and walk off, or in his case, toddle off, shuffle off. So we have JD Vance, the VP, who is just tanking in the polls, saying Donald Trump deserves credit for the release of Evan Gershkovich and the others released from Russian prison. Quote, we certainly want these Americans to come back home, but we have to ask ourselves, why are they coming home? And I think it's because bad guys all over the world recognize Donald Trump's about to be back in office. So they're cleaning house. That's a good thing. And I think it's a testament to Donald Trump's strength, Vance told CNN. So like the idea is that everyone's really scared of Trump coming back, so they're doing the deals now. That's a desperate spin from Vance to try and make it look like this is all down to Trump that they've been released, and not the tough negotiations going on between the U.S. administration now and the Russian and the Kremlin. Anyway, Vance must be just. I assume he's not sleeping very well at the moment, because he's getting rinsed by everyone, including his president.
Just minutes later, Trump then seemed to downplay the significance of his vice presidential pick.
I've always had great respect for him, and for the other candidates too. But I will say this, and I think this is well documented. Historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side, who it's going to be. And then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick. Virtually never has it mattered. Maybe Lyndon Johnson mattered for different reasons of what we're talking about, not for vote reasons, but for political reasons, other political reasons. But historically, the choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think JD is. I think that all of them would have been, but you're not.
So, you can do an analysis of what he says here that will give you an indication of what he's really thinking. And he has to keep reminding himself that, I've got to say nice things about JD Vance. But every time he says something nice about JD Vance, he says all of them would have been. Now, you wouldn't say that if you really genuinely were behind JD Vance and he was your pick. But the way we understand it is that JD Vance wasn't Trump's pick. That was foisted upon him by his son, by Elon Musk, and by others, basically. Who else was it? It was definitely Trump Jr. Well, anyway, it's really interesting. There are loads and loads of rumours coming out at the moment that Kellyanne Conway is leaking loads of information to try and get rid of JD Vance. I don't think JD Vance can be dropped. I think it's legally, practically impossible. But there are still people talking about it. But just listen to him. He's like, even if this is true, right? So he's saying, look, the evidence suggests that. And I think evidentially, yes. Like, vice presidents don't have a massive impact on national votes. I think they might have impact on the states where they are from. Of course, JD Vance doesn't convey any kind of advantage for Ohio. In fact, he's one of the least popular of the Republicans there more recently. But nevertheless, like, even if Trump is somewhat correct here, you don't go and say that in public. Saying that is essentially condemning your vice president. You want to be singing the praise of your vice president to the hilt and telling everyone what a wonderful choice it was. This is not that. You can read through this very easily. Let's rewind and say, just think when he mentions Vance and then goes, all of them would have been great. Yeah, Vance is great, but all of them would have been great. There's no need to say all of them would have been great unless you've got something going on in your mind that is just making you regret choosing Vance, and actually all of those others would have done a better job, in your opinion.
The choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think JD is. I think that all of them would have been, but you're not voting that way. You're voting for the president. You're voting for me. If you like me, I'm going to win. If you don't like me, I'm not going to win.
Joining us now,
Interesting. So that was him talking about his vice president pick, JD Vance. Now let's have a little think about Josh Shapiro as being in the I think driving seat for being the VP pick for Kamala Harris. Now there's been a lot of talk. Someone had to go at me the other day. So why have you brought up the religion of Josh Shapiro? You shouldn't do that. That's not on. I'm like, it is completely on. I mean, we're talking about Kamala Harris being a woman, being of Black and Asian origin, and therefore having an effect on those demographics. And you pick a vice president who's from Pennsylvania to tick that off, or from Arizona to tick that off. And then, Mark Kelly is strong on defense because he's a former Navy captain and astronaut, and so therefore he'll be good on Ukraine, for example, etc., etc. Josh Shapiro is Jewish, and he's a young man, and he's from Pennsylvania, and all of these elements of who he is have purchase in different contexts, right? Okay, so you've got The fact that he's a young man and really good rhetorically is going to be, his age, I think is a real benefit. He's been very good rhetorically. He's also, was he not also a prosecutor as well? So on and so forth. But he's from Pennsylvania, Key's battleground state. The fact that he's Jewish is incredibly important because the Israel-Hamas conflict is incredibly divisive within the Democratic Party, right? Far more so than the Republican Party, who have a kind of unanimity of support for Israel, whereas that's not the case with the Democrats. So having someone as a Jew in a position as the VP will be interpreted by people, or could be interpreted by people in a number of different ways. And perception is reality. Perception is super important. So if you are trying to appeal to those on the left of the party who are pro-Palestine and want the US to stop providing weaponry to Israel, how will choosing Josh Shapiro sit with them? But then Josh Shapiro appears to have quite a nuanced position that is no different actually from most of the other mainstream Democrats in terms of, we are supporting Israel, but it doesn't give us carte blanche to give everything to Israel. And actually what they have done in Gaza is not cool. And Josh Shapiro has said this too. And of course, just because you are Jewish, like male or female, just because, you are, just because you're Jewish, it doesn't mean that you are going to support what Israel as a nation, as a government do, right? And this is the kind of difference between Zionism and anti-Semitism and, all these areas where it's so easy to just blanket criticize or evaluate either critics of Israel or Israelis or Jews outside of Israel. And it's much more complex than these, tarring with all of these brushes. Someone, I can't remember who it was the other day, but it was another Jewish Democrat who came on and said, look, I'm Jewish and I am quite critical of the things that the Israeli government is doing. And I can be that, because just because I'm Jewish doesn't mean I have to support everything that the Israeli government does. And I don't. And they suck in this way and this way and this way. And so there is call for nuance. And so Josh Shapiro's pick, if he is picked, could go one of two ways. Like, he could be a Jew who says, hey, hang on, let's have a really nuanced approach to this and actually bring on board people from across the party by taking a more complex view on a very complicated situation. Or he could go towards supporting Israel more and bring, solidify the people in the Democratic Party who are supportive of Israel, but then lose the people who are supportive of Palestine. I doubt he's going to go full on pro-Palestine, but he could bring some of those over. And they talk about this on the Bulwark podcast here.
With potentially the one thing, because if you talk to a progressive, I was talking to some of my progressive friends recently, I was at a dinner with someone, and I talked about Josh Shapiro as like the obvious choice, and like the fork dropped because there's this like, what are you talking about? That would be so bad. In large part because I think that there is concern that he reopens the wound around Israel and Gaza.
So when I was criticized for talking about his religion, right, or maybe even his cultural identity, that is totally valid. That is what people are talking about. As she talks about here, she's speaking to progressive, like, he can't be the one because he is Jewish. Well, actually, is that the case?
I think that's not true, unless Democratic progressives try to make it true. But I think that this is where the grace period for Kamala Harris and the fact that the progressives has just decided to, like, we're all on the train, let's go. I think kind of papers over that, but I'm interested in what you guys think, because there's a lot of concern about this. This is the main reason people are putting up against him.
There is a great article in The Atlantic this morning that I'm jealous of having not written, by Yair Rosenberg on this very subject, where he's like, this is, I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'll just say it. It's basically anti-Semitism, and I've been doing it. It's like soft anti-Semitism against Josh, because Josh's position on Israel is not any different than Mark Kelly's or Tim Walls's or Roy Cooper's or Andy Bashir's. He has spoken a little bit more, I think, urgently about the threat of anti-Semitism in some of these protests, but like on actual policy matters, it's not as if any of these other candidates are anti-Israel or any more than Shapiro is, who said that Bibi is one of the worst world leaders of his life or something like that. He had a quote to that effect. So
when I've been talking about it, it's not my worries about Josh Shapiro. What I've been talking about people's perceptions of Josh Shapiro and whether that will affect the way that they vote, right? So I'm not one of the ones who's like can be seen as anti-Semitic because I think he's a problematic choice. It's more meta than that. It's more about, you know, how these people view him. And my point it goes to what Sarah Longwell was saying there, which is like she was at a dinner with progressives and the forks dropped when you mentioned Josh Shapiro. That's the problem. That's the problem there. It's not Josh Shapiro's Jewishness per se, right? And because his positions on the Israel-Gaza conflict are in line with most other Democrats, but it's other people's perception of him in that position.
Josh's opinion on Israel is just square in the center of Democratic thought on Israel. And people that are not square in the center, that are on the far left, don't like that. And I think he's being maligned for that, like mostly just because he's Jewish. And so I think that's BS. And I don't know. I'm not that worried about it anymore. I was a little worried about it. I don't think it's. I think it's a slight risk to raise the salience of this. But the more you watch the last 9 days, it's like, is anybody? I think of like the Obama used to do the brush off the shoulders, you know, kind of move, and isn't that just like the Harris campaign right now? It's like a couple whiners on Twitter are gonna be mad about this, or like, okay, there are gonna be 15 weirdos burning the American flag outside the convention hall, which is gonna be the most enthusiastic, excited, united convention in memory, because there's just been this this built-in desire for release among the Democratic base to have somebody that gets them excited. I just think that's going to overwhelm everything. Not worried about it. I'm with JVL. Shapiro is LeBron. Bashir is Darko. Carmelo is Pete. Mark Kelly is Chris Bosh. And Tim Walz is Dwayne Wade. I think it's very obvious that that's who each person is in the analogy. And, you know, I guess the only thing that's a little mean to Andy, because Darko was...
So this is a sports analogy, but the point is that they've got a really good set of candidates, you know, strength in depth, but Josh Shapiro is out the front. And if you do lose some to being anti-Israel, then you will gain more than you lose. I think they said this somewhere else. So it's a calculus. It's a calculation that you take. And it looks like they could be running with it. So now let's talk about polls then. Lots of polls coming out all the time. Some of them are a bit all over the shop. We'll come to that in a second. But most of them are appearing to reflect this really big bounce in favour of Harris. And take, for example, Economist YouGov poll. So always when you look at polls, think about how good is the pollster. And if you don't know how good a pollster is, you can always go to 538's pollster ratings. And you can see what they're like here. So Economist YouGov is ranking number 4, really good, high ranking pollster. I wonder if they've got the Economist on there separately. No, they don't. So that's YouGov working with the Economist there, giving a poll that is, so that's going to be an A+ pollster, giving a Harris 46, Trump 44. In the same poll last week, Harris was 44. Trump was 44, Harris was 41. So there has been a huge switcheroo there in favour of Harris. And even if the YouGov poll wasn't a good one, you can look at like for like here, which gives you a really good indication anyway. But yeah, that's an excellent poll in favour of Harris. We've got young voters aged 18 to 34. I think this is drawn from a civics poll, which is from 1,123 registered voters. That's what that means, I think, from the 30th of July. They are a B-rated pollster, so not the greatest pollster. The general election poll was Harris up 49 to 45, so really good results. And out of that, Harris is 55 to 33 against Trump, with young voters 18 to 34. That's up 22. That is insanely good. And check this out. Black voters, Harris is up 86 to Trump's 11. That's a plus 75. That is incredibly significant. And actually, that is going back to the kind of 10% of black voters will vote Republican type thing, which is, I think, you know, where you usually find it. I don't know. I'd have to look at the data there, but that's something I have heard. So that's exactly what the Democrats would want. They want that bounce back in with the black voters, because there's this big worry that black and Latino voters were leaking out to the Republicans, and you know, Biden had lost them. And if he hadn't lost them, then he had lost their desire, their motivation to get out and vote and to mobilize. And so, you know, and probably both. And this is incredibly significant, because not only has Harris got the enthusiasm back, but she's really mobilizing the black and young votes here. Like that is an immensely good poll for the Democrats. You know, even though, I mean, it's a B-rated pollster, so, yeah, but still really good news there. And then we have a POS Strategies. This is only, so B plus rated poll, 2,000 likely voters again. These are battleground states. So Pennsylvania up, Harris up 3, Wisconsin, Harris up 2, Michigan's a tie, Nevada up, Trump is up 1, and Arizona, Trump is up 5. So that would be a worry. And that's, you know, do you pick Mark Kelly? Get you Arizona in the bag, or help you to get Arizona. But don't know where Arizona, where that sits in terms of other polls for Arizona. I'd have to go and check that out. And then another poll here. This is from POS again. Harris against Trump in, that's the Wisconsin one that we just saw, was one of the ones we just saw. But that's 46 to Harris. 48 to Harris. 46 to Trump. Harris up 2. So going in the right direction, these polls. We have, this is one that's all over, I would say all over the shop. I was trying to work out what was going on here, because this seems to be insanely good for Trump. So general election poll for independents, although this is, I have looked at this, the ActiVote poll. I can't find ActiVote on this whole list of pollsters. So that could tell you something, unless they're called by another name, but they are not on 538's pollster ratings. So I don't know what to make of that. But they have, for independents, Trump is 62%, up 24. Harris at 38%. Now, to get that much of a swing, when we've just had the news we have, something weird is going on. So I was looking at the poll. I went to ActiVote and found this poll. And actually, it's an N of 1,000. So you've got 1,000 respondents. So it's not a massive poll, really. I researched this some years ago, because people think you have to have shed loads of people polling. I was listening to Brian Tyler Cohen the other day on his live stream, and he wanted like a survey of, he wanted 15,000 people on his live stream. He had like 25,000 people watching. He wanted 15,000 people responding, so it'd be it would qualify for being a good poll. But actually, like 5,000 respondents is a really good N, and will give you, I mean, it depends what your confidence values are in the polls as to how good your polls are going to be, depending on what number of people you have responding. I advise you just go and Google sort of confidence intervals and sample sizes, and get a good explanation from someone that knows what they're talking about more than I do. But yeah, so you don't have to have like massive sample sizes for really accurate polls. That said, 1,000 people responding here. So sample size of 1,000. And when you look at independents, so from the affiliation here, 24% of those are independents, which means you've got 240 people in independents. And then you've got a 62% of those 240 people. And that is a plus 24% there. I think, well, it could be skewed because the sample is just too small for the independents, like 240 people. Effectively, that's a survey of 240 people. I'm not trying to make excuses for Harris here, but because this needs explaining. This is anomalous given all the other data you see supporting a bump for Harris, and yet we've got one poll here that has the independents voting 62 to 38 for Harris. If that's replicated, then Harris has got a massive 62 for 38, Trump for Harris. Harris has got a massive job on her hands. Right, Jake Bro here gives a bit of I'm just trying to see what polls these are, but he gives a bit of a synopsis for some of these polls. I do not believe that there's ever been as historic of a shift in polling in American politics in just a single week. Trump is down 50 electoral votes. Harris is up 29 electoral votes. So this is when you then superimpose these polls onto the electoral college voting and these states, then actually it looks like Harris is winning. Or having an incredible swing in her direction compared to what it was. Maine has gone from barely GOP to now likely Dem, +4 for Harris. New Hampshire, barely GOP for now likely Dem, +4 for Harris as well. Nevada, likely GOP to +6 for Harris. Michigan, barely GOP for now Dem, +15 for Harris, obviously. Arizona, likely GOP, now exactly tied, which has gone -11 for Trump. So these gone up. I think that's a movement. Likely Dem isn't +4 for Harris. She's gone up 4. Sorry, that's my misinterpretation. So Maine being barely GOP, now likely Dem, has been a shift in 4 points in favor of Harris. 4 points in favor of Harris in New Hampshire, 6 points in Nevada, 15 points shift there, swing in Democrats' favor in Michigan, going from barely GOP to barely Dem, likely GOP to exactly tied. So Trump has gone down 11 in Arizona, and Wisconsin barely GOP to exactly tied, -10 for Trump. So Harris has also strengthened her numbers, gaining on Trump in the polls in Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Harris has not even picked a VP yet, and the Democrats have not had their convention. Trump is toast. So he's being very positive for where Harris is. And Harris is definitely in a much better place than she was. It has indeed been an absolutely incredible week for her. Lots of people are saying this week has gone better than it possibly, anyone was thinking it possibly could have gone. Everything has gone in her favor. Trump and Vance have been saying really problematic things, tanking in their own kind of speeches or interviews, and saying just outright weird or destructive things for their campaign. And that is just playing very well with the polls and with the news cycles. Here we have 538's polling average, and that has Harris up 1.2%, 44.9 for Harris, 43.6 for Trump, and you can check that out there. So there has been a sizable shift in Harris's favor, and as mentioned by Jake Bro, it is looking like they would get a bump from the VP pick and from the convention. And there's talk also that Kennedy's vote is now, according to some polls, Kennedy is actually being more of a problem for Trump than for Harris. So that's something else to throw into the mix. So anyway, hopefully that's of interest for you. That's my smorgasbord of nuggets. Thanks for watching. Really do appreciate your support. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.